I will now hand it over to Laura Jones, Executive Vice President and Chief Strategic Officer. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Alexa. Well, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on what part of the country you're in. We're really pleased to be with you again this week. For those of you who are rejoining us, and for those of you who are new to our webinars, welcome. I'm joined this morning by my colleague, Corinne Pullman, who is our expert in all things to do with dealing with Ottawa, as well as Brendan is with us this morning, or Rachel?
Brendan's here.
Brendan's here. So, you know, as we've commented on several webinars, announcements are getting made in real time. So I should tell everyone that we're also scrambling to respond to some media today because the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent announcement was made this morning, and so I may be jumping off and handing things over to Corinne, and you may see a little bit more of a scramble than normal, and we'll get straight to those details because I'm sure that you're all wanting to know what we know, and so we'll get right to those, but we may appear a tiny bit less organized than we sometimes are, only because we're also juggling responding to media and staying on top of the current announcements as they are happening in real time today. So Brendan is joining us. Brendan handles business resources calls from across Canada, but he's based in British Columbia, so he does a lot of his work here, and he's a terrific resource. And between the three of them, we're hopefully going to be able to answer many of your questions, or at least clarify where we don't have answers, because in some cases the government doesn't have answers. So Corinne was sharing with me yesterday, for example, that she's working with the Canada Revenue Agency on, they have a list of 150 questions that they don't have answers to. And so there's a lot, obviously, in the alphabet soup of different programs that have been announced, and many of the details are still being worked out, again, in real time. This is kind of an extraordinary period of time for everyone, including those designing government programs. So let's get to the first slide, and we'll get straight to kind of our what we want to do today. I quickly just wanted to mention, though, that we have some upcoming webinars, one on how to use the CRA calculator, and that's later today, right, Corinne? Corinne, are you there?
Sure. I am there, yes. It's the English webinar is at 3 o'clock. It is completely fully subscribed, however, and then we have a French webinar at 4 o'clock, which has still some space. However, we're working right now with CRA to see if we can get another webinar in English for next week, so stay tuned. I know many people were disappointed when they learned it was already fully subscribed, but we are going to see if we can get next week CRA to do another one for us.
Wow,
oh, and keep in mind, keep in mind this will be recorded today, so we will also have it up on our website right after the webinar.
Yeah, that's right. So you can check out the recording if you couldn't get in, and that's a popular one then, because the email just went out last night. I know we've been scrambling with CRA to get this one organized. We've also got one on mental health with Morneau Chappelle, and again, that will also be on our website. We did one earlier in the week with Shopify for those interested in e-commerce and maybe hearing a little bit more about what their offer is. They do have an offer for 3 months for free for small businesses, so we decided we would work with them and make that available in case that was of interest, and we did have many join us for that, so that's also on our webinar if you want to check that out. We go to the next slide. So we're going to go through the key federal programs, also, you know, what else is new this week, and we're also going to talk a little bit more about creative coping. The important tip that we continue to emphasize is around keeping a business log or journal, and you know that you're going to your future selves are going to thank yourselves from today for doing this, because you know when an auditor comes in and says, well, why did you do that, or you know how did you base these decisions? Just having that information, and also just keeping track of the various things you're doing, and oh, I thought I paid that bill. Did I pay that bill? I think that keeping that journal is going to be critical. But I'm thinking, Corinne, we should probably get straight to kind of the big news of the day, because people will probably be anxious to hear that, and then maybe go back over some of the other slides. So Alexa, maybe you could, or Steve, whoever's advancing the slide deck, just flip to the next slide. And yeah, let's go to the slide on, well, this is what you're worried about. Cash flow, number one, meeting payroll, paying rent. So let's flip to that side on the Canada Emergency Rent Assistance provision, because this is literally just announced in less than an hour ago. So this is the new plan that was announced. It will apply for April, May, June. It will offer property owners a loan, a portion of which is going to be forgivable as long as they reduce the rent for their commercial tenants by 75%. So as a tenant, you're looking at potentially a 75% rent reduction if you qualify. And so that's the if, right? And so you have to have had a 70% or greater revenue drop to qualify. And I think the way they're doing it is they're looking at your April, May, June compared to the same period last year, or, and this will help newer businesses, a January, February time for 2020. And so both the feds and the provinces are kicking in to cover the cost of this, and all have now agreed to be part of the program. I think there was some late night negotiations on that. It's going to be available through the CMHC, and it should be available by mid-May. So there are some details that we still need to figure out. For example, how does this work between the landlord and the tenant? What we understand is that the landlord is going to have to get an attestation from the tenant that the rent relief has been passed on. But essentially, they will have a forgivable loan, and rents will be reduced by 75% for tenants with a 70% revenue drop. The other question, of course, we have is there are a lot of questions. So what if the landlord doesn't go for this? Then what? Then what happens? We are going to be surveying on this tonight. So we knew this was coming, and we've been putting together some survey questions, and we are really going to want your feedback on this program so that we can get that into governments. We are very concerned about those that are still falling through the cracks. So for those that have had significant revenue losses, but you may not hit the 70% threshold and don't have enough help or any help from other programs. But that's the basics of the commercial rent assistance program. Corinne, what am I missing here? Jump in.
One other very important detail is that it's available for rents of up to $50,000. It's one thing I neglected to put on the slide. So it only applies to rents that are $50,000 or less. So that's an important detail to know. There may be some who have rents that are higher than that. The government did indicate today that there will be more coming for rents of larger companies. There'll be another plan coming out, we don't know when, that's going to try to address rents for those larger companies that may be above the $50,000 threshold.
Yeah, and we're already seeing some comments from people saying, why 70%? That's so high. 8 restaurants, 50 to 60% decline. These are great comments. We need to get your comments in. So please let us know whether this is going to help you or not, and a few more details. That is extremely helpful as we're getting this information to governments. Anything else on the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program that we want to cover off right now? Why don't we go back to some of where we were? Let's see. Okay, we did put that one first in the deck. So I think we can go on to some of the other programs, and then we'll take some questions. And Corinne, I'm gonna turn the keys over to you for a little while. I've got to jump off and do a couple of media interviews on this, and then I'll jump back on if I can. But I think you're driving anyway for the next part of this presentation.
I am. Thanks, Laura.
I'll let you know when I'm back through the chat box.
Great, thank you. All right, good afternoon, everybody. So we want to also share with you, in addition, of course, to the commercial rent relief program and some of the information we're learning today, there are 3 other big programs the government has announced, and we'll walk through each of them a little bit and some of the new stuff associated with them. First is the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, which, just a reminder, is that 75% wage subsidy for businesses that can show a 15% drop in revenue for the month of March, or a 30% drop in revenue in April and May. The good news is this is going to be open for applications starting Monday, April 27th. So this coming Monday, you can start applying for the wage subsidy, and you can do that through My Business Account. You can also do it through Represent a Client portal as well, and they're going to have an online portal which you'll be able to use if you're not part of the other two ways to get that. We do encourage our members all the time to open up a My Business Account. It allows you to manage your information and communications with CRA a lot more easily, but you don't need to have it for this. You can do their online portal as well. They have told us that they think the money will start flowing the week of May 5th, but the applications will start next week. CRA has also created a calculator that they have launched that is supposed to help you assist with calculating the 75% wage subsidy. There are still some bugs in it, we've been told and understand, and I know that some folks have already alerted us that there seems to be some errors in it as well. So we know CRA is continuing to tweak and fix it and do what they can. And as mentioned earlier, we are going to be having CRA on a webinar later today to talk through the wage subsidy and how to do the calculations. But we hope to have another one next week to go through the calculator in more detail. In order to get the wage subsidy, you have to compare your revenues for the same month in the previous year or to January, February of 2020. You can use either a cash accounting or an accrual accounting method to calculate your losses, so whichever works best for you. There is a maximum per employee. They will provide a maximum of $847 per week per employee, which is equivalent to about someone making $58,700 per year. All kinds of different types of businesses can access it, whether you're a corporation, a sole proprietor, or a partnership, and there is no limit on the number of employees you can have accessing it. It's just the amount per employee that is there. There's a limit to that. You will have to attest that you've done everything you can to pay the additional 25% or topping up their salary from 75 to 100, but you don't have to do it. So this is not when there is an audit potentially down the road, and we don't believe that everyone's going to get audited on this. However, this is something that will not matter to CRA. It's simply that they're wanting you to try your best to do that, but you're not required to top them up if you can't afford it. If you go to the next slide, it's a bit of an infographic we've created to help you figure out a little bit some of the complexities around the wage subsidy and how to figure out whether which of your employees are eligible, and if so, what type of calculation do you need to do. As you can see here, it depends on whether your employees are arm's length or not. There's somewhat different rules, and if they're above a certain amount of threshold, which is basically the $58,700, or if they're below it. So it helps you to walk through, I hope, a little bit how to do the actual wage subsidy. This is up on our website as well, but it is part of the handout, so feel free to refer to it when you try to do your own calculations around this. But I wanted to make you aware that this information is out there, and hopefully it can be helpful. And it's our attempt to try to simplify some of the complexities the government has put in to the entire wage subsidy system. If you go to the next slide, these are some of the common questions that we have and we've been hearing, and we thought we'd share. First of all, can you apply for both the 75% and 10% wage subsidy at the same time? Yes, you can. But just know that if you do, the 75% wage subsidy will be reduced by 10%. So in total, you can never have more than a 75% wage subsidy. So we've been encouraging a lot of our members to take the 10% wage subsidy while we were waiting. And if there happens to be some overlap, that's not a problem. They'll just reduce it by 10%, the 75% wage subsidy. Lots of folks asking about employer salary, if that can be included. Yes, it can. If you draw a salary from the corporation prior to March 15th, it can be included as part of the wage subsidy. However, if you pay yourself in dividends, you cannot be included. And then a lot of folks have asked about the month of March. The fact is that you do have to compare the entire month of March from this year to the entire month of March from last year, or to your average revenues for January and February of 2020. However, many have pointed out, and very correctly, that half of March was actually not so bad. So what the government has done is, rather than try to split March, they have suggested that you only need to show a 15% revenue drop for March to sort of recognize the fact that half the month was actually quite normal operations for many businesses. And then finally, the calculation for the revenue drop is going to be based on gross revenues. That is another question we often get. So that is where we are. So another program that has been made available over the last few weeks is the Canada Emergency Business Account. Just a reminder, this is a loan with a forgivable portion that is interest-free that you can get through the banks. It's up to $40,000, and it's meant to cover fixed operating costs. Up to $10,000 of that is actually going to can be forgiven if it's repaid by the end of 2022. The criteria for this is based on payroll in 2019. So if you have payroll between 20,000 and 1.5 million in 2019, you would be eligible to apply for this loan. It is fairly simple once you do it. However, we know there's been a few people have run into some glitches. It's been out there now since about April 9th and you have to do it through your primary business bank where you have your business banking account. We have heard it's working fairly well with some banks. We've had very few complaints around, and people are getting their money relatively quickly. But we've also heard about some banks that are doing less well. For example, TD seems to be one that we get a lot of complaints. It seems that they tend to reject a lot of folks, and people really don't know why they're being rejected. When we've done more digging, it seems that they don't really give a clear answer. They just give a very generic answer as to why you've been rejected. And often it has to do with how some of the information may have been entered in the application form. So it can be pretty tricky. We also have realized that there's really no appeals system around this particular program. So if you get rejected, it's really hard to figure out why and to talk to anybody to see if there's something that can be done. So they're getting a bit better at this, the banks, as they kind of still figure things out. However, what we've decided to do is that we are encouraging anybody who has a story they want to tell around their experience, as well as letting us know if you're having issues, to send us an email at CEBA@CFIB.ca. So CEBA, which is the Canada Emergency Business Account, at CFIB.ca. And we're collecting a lot of those, and we're going to try to see if we can get some resolution from the banks. Some of these are very common, consistent complaints, so that allows us to go to them and say, this is clearly an issue for your bank and you need to fix it. Others we can maybe escalate on an individual basis if it seems to be something particular that's rather odd. Again, we can't promise we'll be able to fix it, but we're certainly going to do our best to make sure the banks are held accountable for how they're delivering this particular program. One thing that we wanted to just sort of mention, though, is that some people I know are a little worried about taking out the loan because it's going to just add more debt to your business and to yourself. But the fact is there is $10,000 of that could be forgiven. So one tip really is to just take it out, the $40,000. It is interest-free, so just hold $30,000 of it aside, and then you can spend the $10,000. Most of the loans, you can start paying them back starting in, I think, beginning of 2021. As soon as you can start paying it back, just take it out and give it back to them. Again, no interest has been accumulated, and you've been able to use the $10,000 as you need for your business. So there is still more work to be done, however, on this emergency business account. And if we could just flip to the next slide, and we'll come back to this. We did a survey, this is from last weekend, where we wanted to get a sense of whether the changes that were made last week to the Canada Emergency Business Account helped to bring more people into the mix of being able to access it, because there was a narrower criteria, and the government did widen it a little bit. They used to be, when they first introduced this, you had to have payroll between 50,000 and 1 million. They've now widened it so that you can have payroll from 20,000 to 1.5 million. But even with this widened criteria, as you can see on this slide, 25% of our members still remain ineligible for that particular business account loan. And so it's still a large number, and that you'll see on the left side the different reasons why people are still ineligible. So it could be because they're still above the 1.5 million in terms of payroll, or they're below the 20,000, or they may be paying themselves in dividends, which is obviously they don't have then a T4 to show for that. They may also rely more heavily on contract workers, not just people on the payroll. These are all reasons that we're hearing. So if we can flip back one again to slide 10, you'll see at the bottom, these are the different improvements we continue to push government to make. So as I just mentioned, all those different things, we need to expand this eligibility so that contract workers, people pay themselves in dividends, people that are still under the 20,000 or over the 1.5 million can also still be able to access. So we need to broaden the groups that can be able to access this particular loan. We also believe that the loan should be expanded, especially as the emergency phase goes on, and even as we start to come out of the emergency phase, because the need for more financing is going to continue to be important. So expanding the size of the loan, expanding the size of the forgivable portion of the loan are two things we're continuing to push, especially if we find ourselves in this particular position come in May and June and July. Finally, as I said, there doesn't seem to be much of an appeal process, so it's another area we're asking the government to take some steps to do something about. It's important to note that the banks are really just the vessels to deliver this loan. Ultimately, it is the government of Canada that is administering it, and so it's a little bit they're sort of looking at each other as who's going to deal with all the questions that are arising. Is it the banks or is it the government? Either way, we just want to make sure people are getting answers when they need them. All right, I think we'll flip over to thank you. So here are some common questions we get on the Canada Emergency Business Account. How do you prove you have that payroll between 20,000 and 1.5? Well, essentially, you're going to be asked to provide the amount that you have on your T4 summary from 2019, and that's the number you have to put in there. And so that's what they do, and that's what it is based on, and is likely how CRA down the road may do some auditing once they get to that point. And again, talked about the contract workers are an issue, and if you do have contract workers right now, they are not included, so it does exclude you from being able to access this. Some are having issues with their credit unions not offering it. That was a big issue at the start of this. It is our understanding that all credit unions have now negotiated to be able to offer this. However, it's taking a little bit of time for them to get certified to do so. We have been told that it'll probably be by the end of the month, by the end of April, all credit unions should be certified. So I would just encourage you, if you're in that situation, to continue to go back until they are able to offer the loan. I have heard some expressing a little bit of worry that if they don't get it, there may be no money left because it's already been scooped up by the banks and others. It's our understanding that the government is not planning to cap this. There is a budget set aside for this particular loan, but their intention is not to basically stop offering it once the budget is filled. So that one, I think you do not have to worry. It's you need to just wait for your particular credit union to be able to offer it. Finally, what if I get rejected? Again, I will suggest to you that we are expecting the banks and credit unions to communicate to you why you've been rejected. But we do know that some are not doing that very well. So please give us a call if you're not able to get through to them or get a satisfactory answer from them. And do that by either calling us or sending us an email at ceba@cfib.ca, which we are monitoring and of which is going to help us sort of put together our responses to the banks to keep them accountable. So that's where we're at on that. So what I might do is I might turn it over to Brendan to go through the third, I guess now fourth, government response program, and then we'll maybe do some questions. So Brendan, back over to you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Corinne. So briefly, and we've discussed this, but we continue to get questions on it, so we would like to address it. The Canada Emergency Response Benefit, which we refer to as CERB, basically it has taken the place of EI. Now, to be eligible for CERB, you must have earned at least $5,000 of income in the last 12 months, and this income can be in the form of employment insurance benefits, it can be dividends, or it can be through wages or salary. You must be over the age of 15 years and you must be a Canadian resident. If you meet those standards, you will be eligible to collect CERB. It's also important to note, as I mentioned, that EI applications since March 15th are automatically enrolled into the CERB program. So what the government has told us is that for those workers who would ordinarily be eligible for EI regular benefits anyways, they should still apply through the EI stream. CERB, of course, originally was designed for those who would not normally be eligible for EI benefits, and so they were told to enroll under the CERB program. Now, you can use either of those programs, and as we just mentioned, they will be thrown into the same bucket. However, a couple important things to note is if you do enroll through the EI stream, you do have to adhere to the bi-weekly EI reporting method. I don't know if anybody's been on EI here, but when you're on EI, you do have to report to the government twice every month, basically to let them know whether or not you have any earnings to report at that time. If you enrolled through the CERB stream, you will just do an attestation each month, so once per month, basically to state that you are still eligible to collect. Now, the benefit that is paid out is a flat rate of $2,000, unlike EI, the old EI before COVID and before CERB was implemented, which was based upon a sliding scale up to 55% of your normal earnings. CERB pays out no matter what you were paid before if you're eligible at $2,000 per month, and this can be collected for up to 4 months. Something else important to note is that workers who are on CERB can now earn up to $1,000 per month. Very important, though, to note is that it doesn't work the same way that EI would work, where if you go over the allowable earnings per month, it would go dollar for dollar or 50 cents to the dollar against your earnings. If you're on CERB, and now that everyone is, if you exceed that $1,000 per month, your access to CERB ceases and you don't get the $2,000. So be very careful to address that with your employees and to keep a close eye on payroll to ensure that they don't go over this $1,000 per month mark. And this is $1,000 of gross earnings, so before source deductions, by the way. Also important to note is that the payout is much faster than the old EI system. So from the point of application, once it is approved, monies are being deposited within your account within 3 days of application. So that's important to note as well. So on the next slide, what we're going to do is go over a few of the common questions on CERB. So a very common one we get is, can dividends be included as income to show $5,000 earned in the past year? And the answer, of course, is yes, as long as they're non-eligible dividends, which are those which have been paid out to yourself as a business owner or as a shareholder in the company that are subject to the small business tax rate. Can part-time or seasonal workers apply for CERB? And that's a yes as well. So they have to meet the before mentioned criteria of $5,000 in the last 12 months over the age of 15, but they also must meet the criteria of having earned no more than $1,000 in the past month. Are employers still required to file an ROE for a worker going on to CERB? So this is kind of a two-parter. The basic answer is yes, they are still required to file an ROE anytime there's been a break of employment or a break of earnings for 7 consecutive days. So that's still a requirement. However, how it differs is that your worker doesn't actually have to wait for that ROE to be processed before they can collect CERB. So effectively, that's negated any kind of delays that there were before from application to receiving benefits. Lastly, one of the most common questions we get is CERB taxable? And the answer to this is yes, it is taxable. It's important to note that your employers or employees, excuse me, as well as yourselves, will be issued the full $2,000 each month. So the government is not taxing it for you. However, in your 2021 taxes that you'll be making a claim on 2020 year, you will have to be accountable for these amounts, and the government will ask for the tax dollars to be paid back to them in that manner. So important to note that if you're having discussions with your employees or yourself is look how much taxes will probably be deducted for EI, CPP, and income tax, and then put those aside at this point if you're able to do so. So at this point, we're just going to go to the next slide, which will address what is new for this week.
So before we do
yes.
that, let's take a few questions because they're certainly piling up here.
Yeah.
And then
they are.
What at the provincial level. So I'm going to start with a few questions around the rent program, and then some of these I'll throw to you, Brendan, also on the wage subsidy. There's a number of them, but we'll go through them. One, and I have to say before getting into some of the questions on the rent program, a lot of the details are still to come, so we're not going to probably be able to answer many of these with much confidence and authority, but we're going to do our best. Brent asked, is $50,000 rent per month or per year? The $50,000 rent is per month. So that is a per monthly amount. So that is the criteria that you not be paying more than $50,000 per month for rent. So that one I do know. So Tracy asked, if we have already paid April rent, will we get it back? The intention is that you should. There should be at least, not all of it will be paid back, but 75% of it could be paid back. And that's if, of course, your landlord agrees to put an agreement in together with you and take this loan. And of course, that is one of the big question marks, because we certainly have other questions here from others, including, I think, some landlords who are sort of questioning whether it's something that, trying to understand about whether they need to take out a loan that they have to pay back while forgiving the tenant's rent. And understandably, there is a question mark, because, as a landlord, you also have rent bills to pay, and you have to make sure that you're also able to cover your own expenses. So it is going to be a bit of an interesting challenge to see how many landlords are able to do this. Where our understanding is the forgivable portion of the loan is up to 50%. So that is what the government is going to spend, actually, what they believe, they're going to take on 50% of the cost of the rent. They're asking the employer, the landlord to take on 25% and the tenant to take on 25%. So that's the structure that they're envisioning for this. And I guess they're hoping that for many landlords, this will be something that they'll pursue in order to help keep the tenants that they have. But it's a lot of question marks around there. There's questions here also, for example, from Steph, who asked, is the 75% rent reduction only base rent, or does it include the TMI costs as well? And it's a great question, Steph. It's one I don't have the answer for yet. My suspicion is it should be all those costs combined, but it's unclear at this point in time what it includes. So these are the kinds of details that we're still kind of waiting to understand. Others have expressed concerns about, like Corolla, who says, do I have to show my landlord my sales numbers to qualify? Not happy if that's the case. From what we know so far, Corolla, it's just going to be an attestation that you're going to have to provide to the landlord. Essentially, you just basically attest that you have reached the 70% revenue drop threshold, and that'll be part of the agreement you put together that then gets submitted by the landlord. That's our understanding. However, again, it's these details that we're still waiting to get more of. Hopefully, in the next couple of weeks or in the next week, we'll know more. So there are, of course, lots of questions around this. Here we're moving into some of the questions around. There's one here on wage subsidy from Philippe, who asked, under the 75% emergency wage subsidy program, businesses are required to make their best efforts to top up the employees' salaries. Wouldn't entering into a work sharing program go against the spirit of making best efforts? I'm wondering, Brendan, if you could respond to that one.
Yeah, that's a great question, and this actually couples into another question as well. So let's address this one first. So to our understanding, and we do have questions in with the government right now, which they are yet to answer at this point, but are working on. From our knowledge, any of the amounts that you're spending in terms of your payroll are going to be subject to the wage subsidy. So for the 75% wage subsidy, it can interact with the work share program. And as far as we know, it can interact with CERB as well. I don't know, did that answer the question, or did I miss the initial part?
No, I think that it should. I mean, I think that the point here is that if you're taking advantage of both work share and the wage subsidy, you're not really topping up. And again, you don't have to top up in the wage subsidy. They're strongly suggesting that employers do what they can, but if you're not able to do that, it's not a requirement to take advantage of the program. So it shouldn't affect either way.
Yeah, perfect.
Do you have some questions, Brendan, you want to share?
I do, yeah, absolutely. And it's shifting gears a little bit. It's a great question by Chuck, though, because we're starting to come upon that time where temporary layoff deadlines are starting to creep up on us a little bit. And so Chuck asked, what will be the legal ramifications or procedures after 30 days passed for layoffs? Are employees then automatically dismissed without any responsibility for the employer to bring them back to work after this is all over? So Chuck's referencing 30 days. What we've seen, though, is that most provinces have in place temporary layoff measures of a little bit longer. So in BC, Saskatchewan, and Ontario, for example, a temporary layoff can last for up to 13 weeks before it becomes permanent. In Alberta, currently it's 120 days. I believe in Manitoba, it's 14 weeks. But basically, it's going to be the same rule for all of them. If this time does lapse, then termination pay and severance pay do become payable after that period. That said, CFIB is pushing really hard to get these deadlines either extended or eliminated during this time because, of course, nobody knows how long the whole pandemic issue is going to last. And we foresaw this as being an issue right at the onset, quite honestly. We reached out to each provincial government right away and asked for this to be extended. We say stay tuned for that, but the rules as they stand are that severance pay and termination pay do become payable once the temporary layoff period lapses. Question from Pat regarding the emergency business account. I don't qualify for the $40,000 loan because I pay one staff person as an independent contractor. Is anyone looking into this? And yes, absolutely we are. We are keenly aware that a great large base of our membership do employ contractors. We don't believe this should eliminate you from eligibility for the loan. So we are working on it right now. We addressed that in the slide as well, is that we're pushing for opening up those parameters, not only of the payroll size, but also to include things like dividends and things like contractor wages.
So I might, can I just jump in here? I have a good one, I think, for you. Jenny is asking, what does it mean by hiring your employees retroactively? Can you give an example of that?
Yeah, that's a fabulous question. So what we've seen, of course, is that a lot of businesses were forced to temporarily lay off their workers, either because there's a significant decrease in demand for the services or for their product, or B, if they had to temporarily close their business, such as, restaurants, nightclubs, things of that nature. So what the government has said basically is that even though these people have maybe applied for EI or CERB, we can now retroactively go back and pay them wages over this time. Now, you should know too that this is going to create a cash flow issue, of course. If you don't have revenues coming in, you may not have the ability to actually pay these employees those wages for that period of time that they've already been on EI and CERB. But you do have the ability now to go back and pay them as if it were a regular payroll. So you can backdate your payroll over that time. You can then pay them those wages, and then you can apply the wage subsidy program to those wages that are already paid once you apply come April 27th here for that first period. Now, where this creates a significant headache potentially is for your employees, because, of course, they've been receiving EI benefits or CERB benefits in this case, and the government's going to want that money back once they see that they're back on payroll. So what needs to happen here is there needs to be a discussion on which kind of benefits those employees over that period the most, if, of course, your business can afford to foot that significant payroll bill over that time. So what works better for them, 75% of their regular wages or the $2,000 flat fee that they're getting for CERB? If you and them both agree that the 75% is going to be more beneficial, then they should be aware that the government's going to come back for the $2,000. They may not, the government won't come back for the $2,000 probably right away, but they will down the road. So you kind of have to have, like I say, have that discussion with them, figure out what works best for all parties over that period of time. And then you can go forward, of course, with the wage subsidy, applying it on an ongoing basis. I'll mention too that the workers don't actually have to be performing work to be eligible for this subsidy. The government rather wanted this as a way to continue to keep workers tied to the business, so that, if they do some work from home, great. But if they don't, that's okay too. You can more or less just pay them the 75% subsidy to be at home and to stay at home.
All right, well, let's do a couple more slides, and then we'll maybe do a few more questions. Did you want to take the next slide, or do you want to?
Yeah, sure. I'll take it really quickly, and you can sort of add in anything too, because obviously you're at the tip of the iceberg in terms of the information flow. So something to cover real quick is that Manitoba now joins Saskatchewan and Nova Scotia in providing a one-time grant to help small businesses. In Manitoba, what this looks like is an interest-free loan for up to $6,000, which is completely forgivable for any business that's not able to access other federal emergency assistance programs. And this is important too, because we've heard from a lot of our members that they fall between those cracks, those support cracks and financial supports that are intended to help businesses at this time. We raised that obviously with the federal government and made it abundantly clear with the provincial governments as well. And so it's an important step for Manitoba to reach a point where they were willing to do this on behalf of small businesses in that province, and good policy often spreads to other provinces too. So this is sort of the spark that can hopefully help catch fire across the rest of the provinces. To note, more provinces may soon be in a position to start to loosen some of the restrictions on business operations. So in addition to Saskatchewan, Quebec, and BC, PEI, Newfoundland, New Brunswick, and Manitoba have also indicated that they may soon be in a position to start reopening parts of their economy in the near future. Obviously, this still has to be done in a safe manner, so there's going to be a little bit more impetus on those businesses reopening to have safety measures in place. For instance, maybe you can supply your employees with masks if you can get your hands on them, hand sanitizer, have limits to the number of employees and customers who can be in the store at one time, use social distancing lines on the floors, things of that nature. And there's also some further clarification that was provided around curbside delivery in some provinces. And so obviously visuals are a lot easier to digest for a lot of people than either listening to us speak or perhaps listening to or looking at the slides. So what we've done is we've created a quick curbside pickup provincial breakdown here. You'll see British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Nova Scotia, PEI, Newfoundland, and Labrador all allow it without any sort of limitations. They more or less go on the honor system here that you guys are smart and you're going to put the proper precautions in place. Go ahead.
I'm just going to cut in here because this is actually outdated already. We just found out yesterday that New Brunswick is also on the list with the left side, so they're no longer having any limits.
Fabulous.
So there you go.
That's great, and I mean it's a good example for everyone listening too of how quickly and how fluid these rules are, and that the government really is making it up as they go along on all levels here, which is important because it shows that CFIB and your support and your voice is being heard, and that we do have some input in regards to how these things are being developed. In the right column there as well, so New Brunswick no longer applies to that column. That's fabulous. In Quebec, real quick, I'll just mention that priority retailers are only allowed, so pharmacies and grocery stores, things of that nature. And in Ontario, of course, they're only allowing as well hardware products, vehicle parts and supplies, pet and animal supplies, office supplies like computer products, including computer repair, as well as safety supplies. And obviously, we are working hard to have that right column eliminated altogether because you guys have pivoted and you guys have adjusted the way you're doing business. And we think the provinces also have to fall in line and allow those as well.
All right. So let's do a few more questions and then we'll continue along. Just a reminder to everybody, we get many questions here. We're going to do our best to answer as many as we possibly can. If it's not answered here, then rest assured that anything that looks like it needs an escalation, we'll try to see if we can get someone to get back to you. Otherwise, we also encourage you to call our business resources counselors like Brendan, who are happy to sort of follow up with you and make sure that we're getting you the right information. So a question here I have from Suzanne, I think it was. Now, of course, I lost it. I apologize for that. Where is she now?
That's okay. Well, you find that one,
here
Corinne.
No,
good. Perfect. Go ahead.
What exactly is the cutoff date for the wage subsidy? It looks like it is the 10th of May running to June 6th. Are we able to apply for June and July? So the wage subsidy program is actually running from, it applies to salaries paid between March 15th and June 6th. So it's a 12-week period at the moment. So you can then go back to try and get the wage subsidy for anything you may have paid in March, or as Brendan just sort of described, if you bring back people retroactively. We are going to be lobbying and pushing for this to be extended. We do believe that this was obviously put together at a time when they weren't sure how long things were going to last. Now that we think that things are going to be lasting a little longer in terms of the emergency, and even as we come out of it, there may still be a real need for this type of support. We're going to be pushing the government to go beyond June 6th. However, as of right now, it's only going to apply for salaries paid between March 15th and June 6th. So, but rest assured, it is high on our agenda to do something about. So thank you, Suzanne. Maybe, Brendan, you and I can go back and forth if you want to grab one, and then I can grab another after.
Yeah, so a really great question from Charlene that we're getting a lot as well. And this is in relation to both the 10% wage subsidy as well as the 75% wage subsidy. And Charlene asks, if a company has payroll outsourced, which of course many of our members do, should the payroll company be applying on behalf of your company? So the question, or the answer, I guess, is it depends on your payroll company. However, so for the 10%, which is basically the withholding of the employee's income tax, You can do this directly. We're told by the payroll companies, though, that if you do outsource your payroll, you'll have to advise them on how much that is. So you'll have to do the calculation and advise them on how much they should withhold in regards to the 10% wage subsidy. Now, for the 75% wage subsidy, it's important to note that you're going to have to apply for this through your My Business account. At least that's the only source we know at this point that you can go through, or the only portal, excuse me. So that will either have to be done by you, or it can be done by someone you make a representative of your company. Now, I don't know how full service your payroll company is, but if they will do that and be a representative for you, you can designate them as such, and they can apply through it on your My Business account. My guess is, though, is you're going to have to do this yourself through the CRA portal.
Great, thank you. I have a question here from Mark, who's asking, if you've received the $2,000 CERB, can you switch to the CEWS, the emergency wage subsidy, as an employer drawing a salary from the corporation? Well, Mark, this is similar to, I think, something that Brendan just talked about. You certainly can. However, you may have to pay back some of that CERB at some point or another if you're overlapping the two. So if it's found later that you actually got the CERB at the same time you got the wage subsidy for yourself, then you'll likely have to pay back that CERB. We're not sure exactly how that's going to happen yet, though I think there are tips, or they're not tips, there's actually directions on how you can pay back the extra amount that was paid in, that you cannot do both at the same time. So it is really something that you have to be aware of when you apply for the emergency wage subsidy if you already have the CERB. I'm hoping that's correct, Brendan, what I'm saying.
Yep, to my knowledge it is. Yeah, perfect. Question from Stephen here regarding the wage subsidy program, 75%. Stephen asks, is the $847 per week net pay for the employee? And this will be the gross pay. So this is pre-source deductions that the $847 per week cap is applied to.
Right.
And further on that, actually, another question from another one of our members, Darcy, who also asked about the CEWS. Do you know if the CEWS, so the wage subsidy program, can be used for new hires or only for employees that were already on payroll before COVID? So we're told that they actually can be applied to new hires. The question then, of course, because they said the calculation period is from January 1st to March 15th, is how to calculate. They haven't told us exactly yet, but we're interpreting that you would use their contractually agreed upon wage. And then, of course, take 75% of that to see what part is eligible for the CEWS. Of course, until we hear more from the government on specifically how to answer that question, that is only an inference on our part.
Great. I'm going to just take a couple comments here, and then maybe we'll go back to the slides. I had Angela tell us that TD approved their CEBA loan right away, and they got their money right away. So TD does have some good results as well. So I didn't mean to single them out, Angela, but they are the institution for which we had the most feedback on. So I'm really glad to hear that your experience was very good with TD. Somebody else, though, Louiselle, said that her application was accepted by her financial institution 10 days ago and is asking how long it will take to receive the funds. This is another issue that we've been hearing. Some banks are receiving them quite quickly. Some people are getting them within 2 to 3 days. Others we've been hearing can take up to 10 days as well. If you haven't got anything yet, I would suggest you call the bank and try to find out where your application is at to make sure that they actually have it in the system and that it's being processed. I think that's an important one as well. And finally, I just wanted to touch on Angelica also on the emergency business account loan. She says, when is it time to pay? Should we pay only $30,000 before December 31st, 2022, or do we pay everything? You only have to pay the $30,000 if you do it before December 31st, 2022. So that I think is fairly straightforward. All right, so let's move on to a few more slides so we can get through this before the end of the hour. So we wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about how to cope through this very difficult period in various ways. Giving examples of what some other businesses might be doing. We're also very interested to hear maybe what your businesses has done to help get through this particular tough period. So there's ways that your businesses has been coping with the current period that we're in. We'll also talk a little bit about how you can financially cope as well as emotionally cope with what is going on. So on this slide here, you can see, of course, just some great examples of innovative businesses trying to do different things to keep their business up and running in some form during this period. So maybe drawing some inspiration from some of them. For example, we have some stores using social media like Instagram to post new products and getting customers to sort of direct message them through that medium and then delivering them to their homes. We've heard definitely a lot from hair salons and gyms and yoga studios using videos either through YouTube or through sort of live video transmissions, either giving directions on how to cut your hair or doing classes or fitness workouts. We've had, of course, some interesting ones. This is one here in Ottawa where there's a nonprofit car riding service that usually provides help when people are out at bars at night and don't want to drive home. They go in and help do that. But of course, that's not available now. So they sort of pivoted their service to now provide local food delivery at a much lower cost to businesses or restaurants that have traditionally not done much takeout, and sort of giving everybody a sort of a low cost way of getting some of that food in the door of people that are willing to purchase the food. Again, also lots of really creative things going on with breweries who are making hand sanitizers, clothing designers who have pivoted to making face masks and gowns and that kind of thing. But we're really kind of interested in learning a bit more from you. So please feel free to share through the chat room as well as on any of our surveys so that we can all kind of see and get inspired by what people are trying to do. Brendan, do you have any examples that you'd like to share maybe of something cool you've seen from an innovative approach that's being taken?
Yeah, and it's not necessarily unique, but it is important to note that the government is also soliciting those small and medium-sized businesses who are able to pivot from their current production, perhaps, and to create those health and safety products as well. And you can apply for that over the government website. But just for instance, we have a member who makes textiles, who generally makes sort of nursing gowns and things of that nature, and nursing uniforms. And of course, they pivoted to use that material to make all kinds of different sort of masks and safety equipment too. So, the opportunity is not always there, of course, but we are actually very, very impressed by how our members, a lot of them are pivoting and really expanding more or less things, their deliveries and things that, they can continue to use as an addition to the usual business services outside of their normal time frame.
Yeah. Great. Let's go to the next slide. So please share with us your ideas as well. We'll be happy to share them with the group. Another way of coping, of course, is financial. And how do you pay and manage all your bills that you may have? Obviously, we've discussed some of the key federal programs that are also out there, but there are a few other things. For example, there is more liquidity in the market. The government has made money available to the banks, and the fact they're guaranteeing loans up to 80%, and the loans can be as big as $6.25 million. They're being backed by BDC, Business Development Bank of Canada, and Export Development Canada. Again, these are more your regular type of loan where you have to pay interest, but the loan amounts are much larger, and there should be more money out there and should be able to get it a little bit more easily, given that it is guaranteed by the government. Banks are also, of course, making mortgage payment deferrals for up to 6 months, and they're also looking at personal and other loans up to 3 months. We've had pretty decent feedback from our members that the banks are trying to work with them. So it's definitely worth asking if there's something they can do if you haven't done so already. If you need that, you need a bit of that runway to help you through the next few months. We also know that, as we talked about earlier, there were some new programs announced in Manitoba this week. Saskatchewan and Nova Scotia both have some grant programs available as well. We're certainly trying to push other provinces to follow suit. There is other types of financial assistance programs available by province, and we do have a table in the appendix of this handout. So if you go look through to the end, you'll see a table that outlines some of the more significant ones. It's not the only ones. You'll get a full list of those on our website by province. So please go and visit that to see if there's something there that might be able to help. Many tax deferrals have been in the mix. Those were mostly announced early on in the emergency phase. But nothing new has really been added. However, most taxes have been deferred with the exception, for example, of source deductions. So you still have to pay employment insurance and CPP for anybody that's on time. Others, I will say, you may have the actual payment of the tax deferred, but you may still be expected to actually file the paperwork that at the normal time zone, at the normal time that you're supposed to. For example, for GST, HST, they have deferred. You don't have to pay GST, HST owed until end of June. I'm going off the top of my head. But you do have to file all of the paperwork that you would normally file on the timelines that you have in place for your business. So that's another one that you need to keep track. It's again in the appendix of this particular handout will be a chart that has all the tax deferrals that we're aware of, both at the federal and provincial level. And of course, negotiating, with your suppliers, including your landlords. We have tips on what you might want to do when talking to your landlord about working with you. Of course, now that we have the commercial rent assistance program, there's another reason to sit down with your landlord and hopefully be able to work something out that can work for both the landlord and your business. Again, in the appendix, you'll see a few tips on how you might want to approach that kind of a discussion. If we move to the next slide, I may turn this over to you, Brendan, on how to cope emotionally.
Perfect. So obviously this is a stressful time for everyone, but even more so when you're a business owner who's at the helm of the ship, and there's not a lot of places you can turn and people you can talk to, because quite honestly, unless you've run a business, you probably don't really understand that kind of pressure you're under. So this is a quick reminder just to take a moment for yourself. I won't necessarily go through all these steps as you can read, and a lot of them seem like common sense, but this is your weekly reminder just to take a step away, take some time for yourself, take it away from COVID, and just make sure, do a self-assessment and make sure that you're in a good place to continue going forward. Know that we're in your corner, not only fighting government, but we're fighting for you with government, but also as our business resources department. Please do call us if you're feeling, especially stressed out. If you need any help or information, or any of those sorts of things, Business Resources is here to help you out, and we encourage you to give us a call anytime. We are looking forward to speaking with you. I want to go over as well, and Laura usually puts in a plug for this, but keep a journal of how this is affecting your business. And this is not only important in case you're ever audited down the road. Good records are your best defense against a bad audit. But this is also sort of a stress relief technique as well, so that you can kind of unload and offload those thoughts at the end of every single day, so that they don't keep you awake at night as much as normally they would do. On to the next slide as well. This is an important, a very important slide actually that I'd like to take a little more time on, is that we need to hear from you. CFIB takes our marching orders from our members, and action alerts are a very important way that we reach out to government. And that we let them know what you're saying directly, so they get to hear your voice. So ensure that you do help fill these out, as well as our weekly surveys. During this time, this is how we take our directive and ensure that everybody knows, everyone in government knows what needs to be done on your behalf. I would also like to go through to the next slide and just ask at this time, if you think you know somebody, whether they're a member of ours or not, let them know that they can call into us for help as well. So it's a very difficult time, and we want to ensure that we're there for everyone, our own members included. So if you're having a hard time, making payments for your membership as well, know that we're not going to cancel your membership. We are here for you, of course, and of course we understand. Just give us a call and let us know that maybe you can't get to the payment this month, and we'll work with you for sure to ensure that you still have access to our business helpline. Of course, this membership also gives you access to these webinars. It gives you a voice with government. And of course, you have continued access then with our savings programs and our regular e-news updates. You can, of course, look at the link at the bottom here if you think you know someone who could benefit from our help and our representation as well. Link at the bottom there. And then, of course, we have more resources at this time for you as well. We're letting everybody know that for regular and clear and good information, please bookmark our website, cfib.ca/COVID-19. We do ensure that the information is accurate before we put it on our website, and there's just so many conduits right now spewing information out there, and it's hard to know what's right, but we'll ensure that we get the right information into your hands as we get it. It can be difficult, as Corinne said, too, because the government often doesn't know what the information is before they announce the program. But as we learn about it, we'll ensure that you guys are informed as well. You see the CFIB business helpline there, 1-888-234-2232. And then, of course, we are committed to you to give you weekly updates and webinars. But most importantly, as the situation evolves, just know that we will be in your corner. and that we're going to continue to ask you for direction as well as contacting the government regularly about that. Corinne?
Yep, so we've come to the end of the hour. We usually let this run a little bit over so we can get to a few more questions, but feel free, of course, if you need to go to do so. But we do want to try and get as many more questions as we can in. We won't go too much longer, maybe another 10 minutes or so, but we thought it'd be a good idea to still answer some questions. So I'm going to go to a few. There are lots and lots of questions about the new rent agreement stuff, and unfortunately, I'm not sure how much we'll be able to answer, but I'll try. Natasha asks, are foreign landlords eligible for the new CCRA, as we call it, and what happens if they're eligible and don't want to apply for it? So these are the types of details we don't know. My suspicion is as long as the tenant is Canadian, I don't think it should matter if the landlord is a foreign landlord. However, again, these are the details we're still waiting to try to determine. And we're not sure exactly how the relationship is going to be between the landlord and the tenant. And of course, whether the landlords are going to want to voluntarily do this. And so that is pieces of the information we're still trying to understand. So we're going to have to be patient to kind of see what comes out. Of course, we will encourage the government to work closely with the provinces and the landlords to try to find good solutions for a lot of these questions. But unfortunately, at this point, it was really just announced an hour ago, or a little over an hour ago. So we're still trying to determine some of the questions that are going to probably still be coming in for the next little while. Cheryl is asking, the bulk of our business is done till the end of June. Would we be obligated to bring back an employee during our slow season, given I just hear a period is guaranteed for 120 days in Alberta? Maybe Brendan, can you give us some insight on that?
Yeah, so currently as the rules stand, once the deadline for a temporary layoff expires, so Cheryl's referencing in Alberta, it's 120 days currently. You are required to bring them back, and if you don't, if that period expires, you do have to pay out their termination pay and severance. I did mention earlier in our presentation, however, that we are fighting really hard to have that extended. And actually to note, that the temporary layoff period was only 60 days in Alberta. So they have already extended that to 120, and we are pushing hard and hopeful that the provinces will see that this is a problem and that they will all kind of fall in line and extend those periods. So stay tuned for that. We are hopeful, and we are working hard to ensure that you won't be forced into having to pay out these amounts all at one time.
Yeah. Rachel is asking, is there any flexibility on needing a business account with your financial bank versus a personal to be eligible for the CEBA loan? So unfortunately, Rachel, this is one where it's pretty clear that you have to have a business account with your bank in order to be eligible for the loan. We have raised this as an issue with government, as I think many others have as well, because we know there are many sole proprietors, for example, who may have a personal bank account only in which they do their business. And so it is something we're hoping they're going to look at and see if they can figure out a solution to, but it is one of the requirements the banks have when you apply for that loan. So at this point, it's a business account only that allows you to get the CEBA loan. So unfortunately, maybe I'll turn over to you. Do you have a question that you'd like to share, Brendan?
Yeah, so question from Tammy. What constitutes the definition of employee for the wage subsidy? Will this include contractors that I employ in addition to employees? So the definition of employee or the wages that are going to be subject to the CEWS are those that are under your payroll and that are T4 taxable. So if they show up on your T4 sum at the end of the year, these are the amounts that can be applied by the wage subsidy. However, generally, subcontractors don't fall into that area, and neither do dividends for that matter. So basically, if it's included under your payroll and source deductions are made to it, then those amounts can have the CEWS applied to them.
Great.
Next question. Oh, sorry, if you have one, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, Daniel was asking, is it true that if you qualify for one period, i.e. 30% reduction in revenue for April for the wage subsidy, that you automatically qualify for the following period, i.e. for May, regardless of relative revenue in the next qualifying period? So yes, that is true. That is one of the quick changes that was made a couple weeks ago, that if you qualify for one period of the wage subsidy, you automatically qualify for the next period after that. If you then want to get it for the third period, you're supposed to requalify again. So therefore, you have to reapply for the third period. But right now, if you're only applying for April and you get it, you will automatically get it for May.
Perfect. So I have a question from Carlos in regards to the government made a new announcement regarding benefits for students. And I just want to make that very clear that the definition of student does not include high school students. It's for those in post-secondary courses. So basically, Carlos asked, for CERB, do students earning SEL employment income in 2019 over $5,000 qualify? So do they qualify for CERB or do they qualify for the student benefit? They will qualify for either. However, if they did earn over $5,000 in 2019, they will still have access to CERB. And that's important because CERB, of course, pays out $2,000 per month, whereas the student benefit is, I believe, $1,275 per month in most cases.
Great. And I have some great examples here from some folks who are doing different things to cope during the COVID-19. Brent is sharing that he's converted his limousine sedans into COVID cars and are transporting symptomatic homeless to the isolation hotel and patients without transportation to doctors to the assessment center. So Brent, that's great. We're really pleased that you shared how you're trying to cope with your business through this difficult period, and I applaud you for being so creative and doing something to help with the COVID. I also want to share that Angelica also mentioned that their company Avedi are offering 3 months free to companies that want to sell online through their marketplace. So again, great news, Angelica. That's the kind of stuff we like to hear. And then Annetta is telling us that their innovative approach is to offer a $150 coupon towards future products to anyone that makes a donation to Feed Nova Scotia or any outreach program in Nova Scotia of $25 or more, and the coupon expires in 2022. So again, some really creative ideas that we're hearing from our members. So I want to thank you so much for sharing those. So I'll pass it back to you because I wanted to make sure we got a couple of those in.
Yeah, fantastic. And on that note too, I've my 6 years here at CFIB, I've never seen a small business community come together like it has. So obviously this is a terrible situation, but some really good things are coming out of it as well. It's important to note. So I got a question from Avram, who asked, can you use a pre-existing sub-plan to supplement employee CERB? Employees applied for EI and were automatically enrolled in CERB. So what Avram's referencing is the Supplemental Unemployment Benefit Plan, which is basically like a top-up system that you register for with the government where your employee was on EI, and you can add whatever amounts to that on top of it without going dollar for dollar or 50 cents per dollar against their benefits. The answer now is yes. So as we discussed earlier in the presentation, that workers who are on CERB can now earn up to $1,000 per month without it affecting their benefits. And so if you are already enrolled in a sub plan, then absolutely you can do it. The money will be taxable, of course, because it's still considered income. All right. Let's see here. On to the next.
Sure.
Okay. So I have go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Brent.
Okay, I was just going to say a question from Johan. It says, I have employees that have claimed EI before CERB was completely rolled out. They still have to fill out the biweekly EI reports. Is there any way they can stop doing this? That's a fantastic question, Joanna, and it goes really to the heart of CFIB's essence, which is against red tape usually. Unfortunately, in this case, if they have applied through the EI stream, or if they are going to apply through the EI stream, they still have to do the biweekly reporting. And I would advise against having them apply for CERB in this case, because of course that has the potential for dual competing payouts, which of course they can't be on, and the government would come back and try to claw back those amounts. So the short answer is unfortunately, yes, they still have to do the biweekly reports, unless of course they've already applied to the CERB stream, which is a monthly attestation.
Thanks, Brendan. I do have a good question here from Denise that I'm hoping you can help me answer. She's asking, if we backdate payroll to take advantage of the emergency wage subsidy, we will be late for filing April 15th source deductions. Will penalties apply? Do you know?
That's a really good question. We hope not. I believe that is something we have told the government, that this is a potential reality for a lot of businesses. We hope they'll be a little bit more flexible and understanding. Under the current rules, of course, it's possible. However, and this applies to pre-COVID environment is if you make what's called a voluntary disclosure before they come back to you and ask you for those amounts, they don't hold you liable for any kind of interest or penalties. So my advice then would be, obviously, if you can't make that, or if you can't make that remittance, is try to make it as soon as you can afterwards when you do have those funds in the bank. And then if the government does come back to you and fine you or penalize you, please do call us. This is something we can definitely look into and sort of make an appeal for on your behalf as well.
Okay. I'm going to slip one last one in here, and then maybe we'll wind this down. But Bruce was asking if the loan, that's the obviously the CFIB loan, is it in the form of an actual loan or a line of credit? And Bruce, it actually depends on the institution with which you have your business account. That each bank is doing it a little bit differently. Some are providing a term loan. It's a flat amount of $40,000. Others are providing as a line of credit, including even some are on like credit cards that they provide to you, but it's an interest-free one. So it really depends on the institution. It's each are doing it a bit differently. So it depending on who it is, that's what you get. Okay, so I think we'll probably wrap it up there. But before I do that, Brendan, is there any final words you would like to share?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. The first is just in regards to what you're doing to cope. We discussed that earlier, and just want to let you guys know that CFIB does have a Facebook page where we encourage all of our members to discuss, not only with us but with one another, how they're coping, maybe things they're doing to pivot and to increase their offerings or change their offerings. So I do encourage you to connect with other business owners there. As I said, it can be a lonely place, but there's no better place to talk business than with other small business owners. I also want to just put in a plug on behalf of Laura. She's actually very busy doing media right now, so she sent a quick note. Just as a reminder for everyone listening in, to fill out our surveys this weekend, please, especially on, and she used the acronym Geniuses at Work Here in Government, CCRAP, which of course is the Rent Assistance Program in particular, and it helps to give us the details we need to address it with government. So that was just a reminder to fill out the survey in regards to the Rent Assistance Program, especially so that we know how to respond to government on your behalf.
Great. Thanks, Brendan. I also want to thank everybody for joining us today. I'm hopeful that we were able to answer at least some of your questions. I apologize that we can't get to all of them, but we will be using these as well to help us continue to update our frequently asked questions and put together information that could be helpful to you. So please visit the website on a regular basis. It is updated pretty much daily, if not hourly, depending on what we hear. Of course, I do appreciate you being there. This is very complicated stuff. There are lots of different programs. They all have an alphabet soup of acronyms, and it's confusing for all of us. So we're going to continue to do our best to find ways to simplify it as much as possible and clarify as much as possible. That's why our counselors are there. So please, please, please call people like Brendan. We're here to help you, and we're here to help you get through this. On the same time, we're going to continue to push government to make these programs easier to access, to make them more accessible, and to, of course, fill those gaps that still exist, because we know, unfortunately, too many businesses are still falling through the cracks. So we want to make sure that everybody gets the help that they need. So I want to thank you again for joining us. And with that, I will end the webinar.